Clara Voss bit through her lip when they threw her against the counter, and the taste of copper hit the back of her throat before the laughter did. She had come into the Dusty Fork Land office at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning in August, in the year 1887, the same as she had come every Tuesday for the past 6 weeks, with her father's deed in her coat pocket, her figures written in ink on folded paper, and her chin level. She had not come to make trouble. She had come to file a water claim on the eastern spring of Voss Hollow, the same spring her father had dug by hand in the summer of 1871, the same spring that had kept 200 head of cattle alive through 3 dry seasons, the same spring that Harlan Creed, owner of the Creed Consolidated Land Company out of Denver, had decided 3 months ago belonged to him. The man who had pushed her was not Harlan Creed. Creed did not do his own pushing. The man was called Wick Salter, and he was Creed's headland agent. And he had the kind of smile that lived on his face the way mold lives on bread, permanent, effortless, faintly sick. He was standing behind the counter with his arms crossed, and the county clerk, a thin man named Aldous Pratt, was standing beside him, and neither of them had moved when Clara walked through the door, except to look at each other once, the way 2 men look at each other when they have been expecting someone and are pleased that someone has finally arrived. "Miss Voss," Salter said, "we told you last week. You told me the claim was under review." She straightened up from the counter. Her elbow was bleeding where it had caught the edge of the wood. She did not look at it. "I am here to check on the status of that review." "Status is the same." "The status cannot be the same, Mr. Salter, because a review implies a process, and a process implies a timeline, and a timeline implies that something, at some point, actually happens." Salter's smile did not change. "You got a mouth on you for a girl whose name is about to come off a deed. My name is on that deed because my father put it there, and my father put it there because his father built that hollow with his hands. And I will stand at this counter every Tuesday until one of you explains to me in plain language under what legal authority Harlan Creed is filing a competing claim on a spring my family has used for 16 years. She heard the door open behind her. She did not turn around. "Boys," Salter said, looking past her left shoulder, "I believe Miss Voss needs some help finding the door." 2 men came up behind her. One of them put his hand flat between her shoulder blades and walked her forward into the counter again, and her chin caught the edge. And for a second, the whole room went white, and she tasted blood for the second time, and the laughter started, loose and comfortable, the laughter of men in a room they own. "Miss Voss." Aldous Pratt said it from behind his spectacles, with the careful voice of a man reading a notice. "This office is not able to process your claim at this time. I suggest you speak with an attorney. There is no attorney in Dusty Fork who will take my case." Her voice shook only on the last word. She clamped down on it. "Because Harlan Creed holds paper on 4 of the 5 men who practice law in this county, and you know that, Mr. Pratt, and your name is on the paper." The room went quieter than it had been. "Get her out," Salter said. The hand came back to her shoulder, and this time she did not brace for the counter because she was looking at the far wall, at the long bench along the window where men waited for their filings to be processed, and on that bench were 4 men who had been sitting there since before she walked in. 3 of them were looking at the floor. 1 of them was not. He was sitting at the end of the bench nearest the door. He was not young, and he was not particularly large, and there was nothing about him that declared itself the way dangerous men sometimes declared themselves. He wore a coat the color of river mud and a hat that had been rained on more than once, and his hands were resting on his knees, and he was watching what was happening at the counter with an expression that had not changed since the first push. His eyes came to her face. She held them. The hand shoved her toward the door. She caught the doorframe with both hands and stopped herself. She turned around. She looked at Wick Salter and at Aldous Pratt and at the 2 men with their hands still half raised, and she said, loud enough for the bench in the street beyond the open window, "Tuesday the 4th of September, Dusty Fork Land Office, Pratt County, Texas. 2 employees of the Creed Consolidated Land Company physically removed a property owner from a public county office while a county clerk watched. I have the date. I have the witnesses. I have every word that was said in this room, because my father raised me to write things down. You will remember this morning for the rest of your natural lives. I will make sure of it." Salter's smile finally moved. It did not improve. "Go home, Miss Voss, while you still have one." She let go of the doorframe. She walked out into the August heat. She made it 1 block before she turned into the alley, between the assay office and the harness shop, and she leaned her back against the hot boards of the wall, and she pressed the folded deed against her chest with both hands, and she let one single breath come all the way out. One breath. Her father had not raised her to waste more than one. She was still standing there when she heard the boots on the packed dirt of the alley, and she straightened before she could see who it was, because in Dusty Fork, in the summer of 1887, a woman alone in an alley did not have the luxury of being caught off guard. The man from the bench stopped at the mouth of the alley. He did not come closer. He took his hat off. "Miss Voss," he said. "My name is Callum Greer." "I don't know that name." "No, ma'am, you wouldn't." "Then why are you in my alley, Mr. Greer?" He turned the hat once in his hands. He had a scar that started below his left ear and curved down toward his jaw, old and pale, fully healed. His eyes were the color of creek water in November. "Because I have been in that land office 6 times in the past 2 weeks," he said. "And every time I have been in it, I have seen a county clerk stand behind a company man and let a woman get pushed around in a public building. And today I watched it happen again. And I am going to stop pretending it does not concern me." "It does not concern you." "No, ma'am." "Then go." "I reckon I will not." She looked at him. "Mr. Greer, I don't need a man to walk me to my horse." "No, ma'am, you clearly don't." "Then what exactly are you offering?" He was quiet for a moment. "I am a land surveyor," he said. "Or I was, until the company I worked for was bought out by Harlan Creed's holding last spring, and I was told my services were no longer required." She went very still. "I have spent 4 months," he said, "trying to find the one thing a land surveyor fired by Harlan Creed might still be useful for. I walked into that land office this morning looking for it. I believe I found it instead." She studied him a long time. "You're saying you know something." "I'm saying I know quite a lot. And I'm saying a woman who comes back to a county office every week with a deed in her pocket and a mouth that doesn't quit is either very brave or very close to losing something she cannot afford to lose." "Both," she said. "Yes, ma'am, I figured." She folded the deed and put it back in her coat. "You want water for your horse, Mr. Greer? You can have it. You want coffee? I'll make it. You want to tell me what you know? I'll listen to every word. But I will not give you a job. I will not give you a claim on Voss Hollow. And if you are working for Harlan Creed in some capacity I have not yet identified, I will find that out before you reach the end of your first sentence. Are we clear?" "Clear as anything, Miss Voss." "Good. Ride out to the hollow at noon. Come up the main track with your hands visible and your rifle on the saddle, not on your back." She walked past him out of the alley. He watched her go. Then he put his hat back on and stood there a moment with his hands in his pockets, looking at the ground, and something in his face shifted the way a man's face shifts when he has just made a decision he should have made 6 weeks ago. She rode back to Voss Hollow with her elbow still bleeding and her mind already moving, because Clara Voss, at 28 years old, had understood something in the land office that she had not understood fully before that morning. Harlan Creed was not trying to bully her off a spring. He was not even trying to steal a water claim. He was trying to own the valley. Callum Greer arrived at noon, hands visible, rifle on the saddle. Her ranch hand, a boy of 17 named Tobias Fenn, watched him come up the track from the porch with a shotgun held at a 45-degree angle that suggested he had been coached on exactly this. At the kitchen table over coffee black enough to etch tin, Clara asked Greer one question. What was Creed surveying last spring that he needed your firm for, and why did he buy you out instead of just hiring you? Greer set his cup down. Because what he was surveying, he did not want on any independent firm's books. He needed the survey done, and then he needed the firm that did it to disappear. What was he surveying? The underground water table running beneath the eastern third of Pratt County. Greer looked at her. Including the spring on your property. Including the aquifer beneath 4 neighboring ranches. Including the subsoil under the town of Dusty Fork itself. Clara set her cup down slowly. There is a federal infrastructure project, Greer said, coming through the Texas Panhandle inside of 2 years, a municipal water authority, the kind that requires guaranteed subsurface water rights across a continuous parcel. Creed has been buying those parcels one by one for 18 months. Yours is the only one he does not have. Your hollow sits directly on the central recharge zone of the entire aquifer. Without Voss Hollow, he cannot guarantee continuous yield. Without continuous yield, he cannot sell the consolidated water rights to the federal authority. Without that sale, he does not collect the sum that makes everything else he has bought worth anything. How much? Clara said. Greer told her. She had to put her hands flat on the table. He cannot get it by negotiation. Greer said, because you will not sell. I watched him try. 4 months ago, before I was let go. He offered your father twice market value the week before your father passed. My father told him to get off the porch. Yes, ma'am. So, Creed moved to the next method. He pulled in the county clerk. He hired a lawyer in Abilene to draft a competing water claim with a manufactured prior use date. He put Salter in the land office to run interference. 2. And he has been waiting for you to either run out of money for legal fees or run out of nerve. He has been waiting a long time. Yes, ma'am. He's getting impatient. She stood up from the table and walked to the window. Outside, Tobias was sitting on the fence rail with the shotgun across his knees, watching the road with the solemn attention of a boy who had been told his job was important. Mr. Greer, she said. The forged claim. Do you have anything in writing? I have the original survey maps. I had the presence of mind to copy them the night before they locked the office. She turned around. Where are they? In my saddlebag. You rode into my yard with Creed's stolen survey maps in your saddlebag. Yes, ma'am. And you didn't lead with that. I didn't know if you'd trust me yet. She looked at him a long time. Bring them in. He brought them in. She spread them on the kitchen table, and she looked at them for a long time. And then she looked at the figures in the margin. And then she looked at the date stamp in the lower right corner, which was 8 months before the date Creed's competing water claim listed as its original survey. 8 months. This proves the claim is fraudulent, she said. It proves his survey predates his filed prior use date. Which means the prior use date was fabricated after the survey, which means the claim is built on a manufactured timeline, which means a federal land judge would throw it out inside of an afternoon. If I could get it in front of a federal land judge. Yes, ma'am. She folded the maps. She put them in the inside pocket of her father's old leather vest, which was hanging on the hook by the door, and she put the vest on over her shirt, and she buttoned it. Tobias, she called. The boy appeared in the doorway. Ride to the Alderman place. Ask for Nell Alderman. Tell her Clara Voss needs to speak with her this evening. Not tomorrow, tonight. Tobias looked at Callum. Him? He stays. Tobias rode. Nell Alderman arrived at sundown. She was 44 years old, ran her family's ranch alone since her husband's death 3 winters back, and she had the particular stillness of a woman who had decided a long time ago that panic was a luxury she could not afford. She sat at Clara's table and she listened without interrupting, and when Clara finished, Nell was quiet for 10 seconds. My south well, she said. I beg your pardon? My south well went dry in June. I thought it was the season. My neighbor's creek dropped in July. He thought it was the heat. Nell looked at the survey maps. They've been draining the upper table. Clara went cold. Testing the yield, Greer said quietly. Before the sale, you prove yield by testing extraction. They've been pulling water out of the table through 3 test wells on the parcel Creed already owns, which is why the surface water on neighboring properties has been dropping. It's not the drought. Nell pressed her hands flat on the table. That man, she said, with a precision of feeling that Clara found remarkable, has been slowly drying out this valley so he can sell it to the government. Yes, ma'am. How many ranches? At minimum, 6, possibly 9. Nell looked at Clara. What do you need? I need someone to ride to Abilene. Someone Creed's people won't recognize and won't think to follow. I need them to carry a sealed letter to the federal land office there and hand it to a specific man. She wrote a name on a piece of paper and slid it across the table. Nell looked at it. I know his wife. I know you do. That's why I'm asking you. Nell folded the paper. When? Tomorrow at first light. Before Creed knows you've been to my table. He already knows. Nell stood up, calm as winter. His man Salter rides the east road every morning before sunrise. He's been counting horses at every property on the water table for 2 months, my nephew noticed. Didn't know what it meant until tonight. She picked up her coat. I will be in Abilene by Thursday noon. What does your letter say? It says I have documented evidence of a fraudulent prior use claim filed in Pratt County, along with original survey maps showing the manufactured timeline, and I am requesting an emergency federal review on the grounds that a private land company is suppressing water access to active ranching families, while simultaneously draining the regional aquifer ahead of an unsanctioned infrastructure sale. Nell looked at her. You wrote all that already? I wrote it while Tobias was writing to your place. Nell almost smiled. Your father said once you were the sharpest thing on this spread. Told my husband you could read a contract faster than any lawyer he'd met. She pulled her coat on. He was right. Don't get killed before Nell gets back. She rode out. Callum was quiet at the table. After a moment, he said, Miss Voss. Don't say it. Say what? Whatever careful thing you're about to say about the risk. He was quiet again. Then, I was going to say you should know that Salter doesn't just count horses. He reports to Creed every night. Which means Creed knows you had a visitor today, and Creed knows Nell Alderman rode to your property at sundown, and Creed is going to make a decision tonight about how much longer he waits. I know. He has 4 men at the Dusty Fork Hotel. He brought them in from Fort Worth last week. I know that too. Tobias counted them. Tobias is 17. Tobias is observant. She stood up. Mr. Greer, can you ride back to Dusty Fork tonight without being followed? I can try. I don't need you to try. I need you to go back to that hotel, and I need you to sit in the dining room tomorrow morning at breakfast, and I need you to listen to every word those 4 men say within 10 feet of you, and I need you back at my gate by dark tomorrow. And if I hear something urgent before dark? She wrote a name on a second slip of paper. Go to the dry goods store on Crockett Street. Ask for this woman. Tell her Clara sent you. She'll get word to me faster than a horse. He looked at the name. Who is that? Marta Fuentes. She has run that store for 11 years. She has heard every conversation Harlan Creed has ever had in that town, because men who run large operations forget that the woman restocking shelves in the next room has ears. Don't underestimate her. He stood. Miss Voss. Yes. Why are you trusting me? She looked at him straight. Because the only men who have stood up in this valley since Creed arrived are the ones who already lost something to him. You lost your livelihood. That makes you angry. Angry men don't usually work for the people who made them angry. Usually. I have the survey maps. If you were working for Creed, you would have taken them back when I turned to the window. You didn't. He had no answer to that. Ride carefully, Mr. Greer. He rode. She spent the night at the kitchen table with her father's ledger open, writing in her small level hand every word that had been said in that land office, every measurement on the survey maps, every name Greer had spoken, every figure Nell had confirmed. She wrote it twice. She sealed one copy in an oilcloth envelope and buried it in the tin box beneath the hearthstone that her father had used for important papers. The second copy she left in plain sight on the table, because she knew that if men came through her house, she wanted them to find something. Just not the thing that mattered. Tobias came in at midnight from his watch on the South Rise. 2 riders, he said. They came up the east fence line slow. They stopped at the spring for maybe 20 minutes. Then they rode back out. Did they touch the pipe? I couldn't see in the dark. Go check the pipe. If it's been shut, open it. If it's been cut, come get me before you do anything else. He ran. He came back in 10 minutes. Shut. I opened it. She wrote it in the ledger. Good boy. Go sleep 2 hours. Then back on the South Rise. The next morning, before Callum returned, Marta Fuentes came up the track herself. Clara was on her porch with a coffee cup and met her at the gate. Marta was a compact woman of 50 with silver-streaked hair and the brisk movement of someone who had been solving other people's problems for decades. You need to hear this before tonight, Marta said, without preamble. Creed was in the store yesterday at closing. He didn't know I was still in the back. He was talking to Salter. What did he say? He said the Abilene office will not process your claim without a countersignature from the county clerk. And the county clerk has been told not to countersign anything with your name on it. He said, and these are his words exactly, he said, by the end of this week, she won't have a spring to claim. Clara set her cup down on the fence post. He's going to drain it. He's going to run his extraction pumps on the test wells at full capacity for 72 hours. That's enough to drop the recharge zone below your spring's feed depth. Your spring goes dry. Your prior use claim becomes worthless because there's nothing left to claim prior use of. He files, the clerk countersigns, and by the time a federal reviewer gets here from Abilene, there's no water and no viable claim, and Voss Hollow transfers at auction. Clara stood very still. "Miss Voss," Marta said, "I have lived in this town for 22 years. Creed has run 3 families out of this county in the past 5 years using variations of this exact method. I have watched all 3 of them go. 2 of them were friends of mine." She reached into her coat and took out a folded envelope. "This is a letter signed by myself and 11 other women in Dusty Fork. Every one of us has a husband or a father or a son whose name appears on a debt note held by Harlan Creed. This letter lists every one of those notes, with the dates and amounts, and it lists 3 instances where we believe those notes were called in early, fraudulently, to force a property decision. I have been keeping this letter for 2 years. I have been waiting for the right day to give it to the right person." She held it out. Clara took it. She looked at Marta. "You could have given this to anyone." "I could have. I gave it to you." "Why?" "Because last Tuesday, you walked out of that land office bleeding from the elbow, and you stopped on the boardwalk, and you looked up at the sky for 10 seconds, and then you walked to your horse. You did not cry, you did not run. You stood there like a woman taking inventory of what she still had." Marta buttoned her coat. "A woman who takes inventory instead of grieving is the only kind who wins against a man like Creed. Don't lose." She walked back down the track. She did not look back. Callum returned at dark as he had promised. He had 2 things. The first, the 4 men from Fort Worth were not hired for a legal proceeding. They were hired for the same purpose. Men from Fort Worth were usually hired, which was to ensure that a thing happened and that the person most inconvenienced by that thing was not in any position afterward to object to it. The second, Creed had sent a telegram to the Pratt County judge, a man named Elias Dodd, requesting that any federal correspondence addressed to residents of the Eastern Valley be held at the county office for review before delivery. Clara read that twice. Nell's reply from Abilene, when it came, would not reach her. "When?" she said. "The hold goes into effect tomorrow morning. Then we have tonight." She turned to Tobias. "Ride to every neighbor whose name is in Marta's letter. Tonight. All of them. I don't care what hour you arrive. You tell them Clara Voss is asking for 1 rifle at her gate by dawn tomorrow. 1. Not a declaration of war. 1 rifle standing in view of the road, so that when Creed's men ride the east fence in the morning, they count more than a woman and a boy." Tobias ran for the barn. She turned to Callum. "Can you be in Abilene by Thursday? If I ride tonight, I need you to walk into the federal land office and hand my letter directly to the man whose name I gave Nell, not to a clerk, not to a deputy, to him. Nell is already there. Then you confirm it. 2 sources, same story, same maps. A federal examiner cannot ignore 2 unrelated witnesses arriving separately with the same documentation." He looked at her. The lamp on the table lit half his face, and the scar along his jaw, and something behind his eyes that she did not have words for yet. "Miss Voss," he said, "when this is over—" "Not yet, Mr. Greer." "No, but," she said. He took his hat. He rode north into the dark. She went back inside. She sat at the kitchen table. She put her hand on the ledger. She thought about her father, who had dug that spring with his own hands in the summer of 1871, who had carried the pipe from Abilene in a wagon over 2 days of bad road, who had believed with a specific and unshakable faith that a man who built something honest would be allowed to keep it. She thought about the spring going dry. She did not let herself think about it for long. By dawn, there were 7 rifles visible from the road. Amos Alderman, Nell's brother, 61 years old, sat on his horse at the south gate with a Spencer carbine across his saddle, like a man who had been waiting a long time for a reason to be somewhere at sunrise. 3 of Marta's neighbors. A widow named Ruth Cass, who arrived with her own horse, her own rifle, and a pound of cornmeal because she had decided a siege required provisions. A former deputy from the next county who had been let go when Creed's man got elected sheriff, and who had not forgotten it. Salter rode the East Fence Road at 6 that morning and saw the rifles and went back to town at a pace considerably faster than he had arrived. Creed sent a man to the land office at 9. The man came back and reported that the federal hold on mail had been countersigned. Creed, by all reports, was not concerned. He had 4 men from Fort Worth and a county judge and a clerk and a sheriff, and Clara Voss had an old man on a horse and a widow with cornmeal. He did not yet know about Nell in Abilene. He did not know about Callum and his copies of the survey maps. He did not know about the 12-woman letter in Clara's coat, or the ledger buried under the hearthstone, or the fact that Ruth Cass had a son-in-law who worked the telegraph office in a town 15 miles east and had been sending a copy of every incoming wire addressed to the Creed Consolidated Land Company to a post box in Abilene. For 3 weeks, Creed was counting what he could see. He had never learned to count what he couldn't. Thursday brought Nell Alderman back, and she came up the track at a hard canter with dust in her hair and her face alight in a way Clara had not seen on her before. She handed Clara a telegram before she was off the horse. Federal Land Examiner dispatched. Arrival Saturday. Review of Pratt County water claim filings. All parties. On instruction of the Bureau of Land Management, Southwest Division. Signed, Deputy Commissioner J. Aldrich. Clara read it twice. She read it a third time. "Callum," she said. He was there. He sat across the desk from Aldrich for 2 hours. He had the maps. He had your letter. He had my letter. Nell took a breath. "Miss Voss," Aldrich said something before we left. He said he'd been watching Pratt County for 8 months. He said 3 previous complaints had been filed, and then mysteriously withdrawn. He said yours was the first one that came with physical documentation that could not be explained away. The maps. The maps. 2 days later, a federal examiner named Hargreaves rode into Dusty Fork with 2 deputies, and he went first to the county land office, and he asked Aldous Pratt to produce every filing related to the Creed Consolidated water claim in Pratt County, and Aldous Pratt produced them, and Hargreaves set the survey maps on the desk beside them, and he put on his glasses, and he looked at the dates, and he looked at the dates again. Then he looked at Pratt. Pratt's face went the color of old paste. Hargreaves was a quiet man of 55, who spoke at roughly the volume of a man reading aloud to himself in a library. He said, "Mr. Pratt, the date of original survey on this claim is listed in your files as March of 1886. The date of original survey on these maps, which bear your company's own cartographer's stamp, is July of 1885. I would like you to explain that to me in whatever time you require." Pratt did not explain it. He asked for a lawyer. Hargreaves said, "Of course," and told one of his deputies to ensure that Mr. Pratt remained available. He rode out to Voss Hollow that same afternoon. He sat at Clara's kitchen table. He looked at the ledger. He looked at Marta's letter. He looked at the documentation of the spring pipe being shut, with date and time recorded in Clara's hand. He asked her 7 questions, and she answered each one from the ledger, not from memory. And each time he asked if she was certain, she turned to the specific entry and read it to him aloud. "Miss Voss," he said, when she was finished, "you have kept an exceptional record." "My father taught me," she said. "He said the law doesn't remember for you." Hargreaves looked at her. "Your father was a perceptive man." Creed was arrested on a Saturday morning. He was arrested not in a saloon, not in a dramatic confrontation, but in the dining room of the Dusty Fork Hotel while eating his breakfast, which Clara thought was fitting. He was arrested on charges of fraudulent land filing, water rights suppression, conspiracy to defraud the federal government, and interference with a legal review process. Salter was arrested the same hour at the land office. Aldous Pratt cooperated. The county judge, Elias Dodd, resigned his position before sundown and was on a stage to El Paso by morning, which Hargreaves noted in his report as a form of confession. The 4 men from Fort Worth left quietly, the way hired men leave when the man doing the hiring can no longer write checks. Clara rode into Dusty Fork the Monday after. She rode on her father's mare with Tobias on her left and Callum on her right, and behind her came Nell, Alderman, and Ruth Cass and Amos, and 3 of the neighbors from Marta's letter. They rode down the main street at 8 in the morning, and Marta Fuentes was standing on the boardwalk in front of her store, and she watched the column pass, and she did not wave, and she did not call out. But when Clara rode past, Marta pressed her hand once flat over her heart, and Clara saw it. She stopped in front of the land office. She went inside. She set her deed on the counter, and the deputy who had been left to manage the office in Pratt's absence stamped it without a word. The water claim was filed at 10:17 that morning. The trial ran 4 months, in federal court in Abilene. Callum testified on the 3rd day. He brought the original maps and he explained them without embellishment. in the flat, precise language of a man who had spent 20 years measuring things exactly as they were. Marta testified on the 9th day and read from her letter in a voice that did not waver. And when the defense attorney suggested her memory was unreliable, she produced from her coat a second envelope containing 11 corroborating signed statements from the women who had co-authored the letter, which she passed calmly to the clerk while the attorney stood with his mouth open. Clara testified on the 11th day. She had the ledger. She had the copy. She had the oilcloth envelope. She read from them in order, and every date lined up with every document. And when she was asked how she could be certain of details recalled under stress, she said, "Sir, I did not recall them under stress. I wrote them down the night they happened, in my father's shirt, at my father's kitchen table, before I went to sleep. You may examine the ledger. The ink dries differently when you write it fresh and when you write it later. These pages are all fresh." The attorney examined the ledger. He did not ask further questions about her memory. Harlan Creed was convicted on 41 counts. He was sentenced to 11 years in the federal penitentiary in Fort Smith. The Creed Consolidated Land Company's holdings in Pratt County were placed in receivership, and the test wells were ordered capped, and the water table, Callum told her 6 months later, was already recovering. Aldous Pratt served 2 years and then spent the rest of his career as a clerk in a town so small it does not appear on most maps of Texas, which Clara felt was a reasonable outcome for a man of his specific moral caliber. Dusty Fork elected a new county judge. The first case he heard was a petition from 6 ranching families whose land notes were being held by the receivership. He ruled in their favor before noon. Voss Hollow was never sold. The Federal Water Authority came through the valley in 1889, and the representative arrived at Clara's kitchen table with a figure written on a paper. Clara looked at the figure. She wrote a different figure in her ledger. She turned the ledger around and slid it across the table and said, "Gentlemen, that is the figure, and it is non-negotiable, and half of what you write that check for is going to the 6 families whose water Creed spent 2 years quietly draining. You are going to make them whole before you make me anything. Those are the terms." They took the terms. Marta Fuentes expanded her store that year. She hired 3 women who had been without work since their husbands' notes were called in, and she paid them a fair wage, and she kept her own ledger, which she had audited every year by a lawyer from Abilene, and not by anyone local. Tobias Fenn did not stay a ranch hand. He studied law, eventually, in a city far from Dusty Fork, and in 1901, he argued a water rights case before the Texas Supreme Court that established a legal precedent still cited 60 years later, and in the opening paragraph of his brief, he wrote, "The right to water is not given by the powerful to the powerless. It rises from the ground itself, and it belongs to those who have kept the ground." Callum Greer built a small house on the north edge of Voss Hollow with his own hands, and he worked the land, and he put away his surveying instruments for 4 years, and then in the spring of 1891, Clara asked him to help her document the aquifer recovery because she wanted the measurements in writing, and he said he would, and he did, and somewhere in the middle of measuring the depth of the eastern spring on a morning in April, they had a conversation that had been waiting since the alley behind the assay office, and neither of them needed many words for it, because they were both, by nature, more comfortable with what was written than with what was said. They married that June. Nell Alderman held the ring. Clara Voss kept the ledger. She kept it until the day she died, in the house her father had built, in the bed her mother had sewn the quilt for, at the age of 71. And on the last page, in handwriting that had not changed much since the summer of 1887, she had written in ink that did not fade, "Voss Hollow, still standing, water still running, as my father left it, as I kept it, as it will be." And it was. Clara never had an army, a fortune, or a powerful name behind her. What she had was a habit her father taught her. Write it down, keep the record, trust that truth has weight when you can hold it in your hands. The people who stood beside her didn't come because she was winning. They came because she refused to stop. That kind of steadiness is something every one of us can practice, starting today, in whatever small corner of life we're trying to hold on to. A small note for you. This story was imagined and written by AI, crafted to entertain you and, hopefully, leave something quietly useful behind, a reminder that ordinary people, with honest records and steady hearts, can outlast even the most powerful kind of wrong.